Joining us now on Encounter is Sean Callahan, who's the CEO and President of Catholic Relief Services. Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
Been with the organization now for almost 30 years, you were saying?
Yeah, it sounds incredible. You know, when I graduated from graduate school, I hopped in for a one-year experience, and you know, after about 10 or 15 years, my mom stopped asking me if I was going to get a real job, and yeah, it's coming up on my 30th anniversary next year.
And talk about, I know that you're actually coming up on your first anniversary too as President and CEO. Talk about what that was like. You worked for the organization for most of your adult life, and now to be the CEO and President.
You know, it's really humbling, to be honest with you, because we have such a great team out in the field and work with some really special people overseas. So my job is really to represent that, help position it, and to try to get the word out. And so that's what I've been trying to do, traveling overseas so I can, you know, keep current with what's going on, meet the people there, and then bring the word back to people here in the United States.
And I suppose it was a very keen of you to have that kind of experience and then now be in the CEO and President position, how that has helped you being in the field and being able to relate from your experience.
Yeah, I've been lucky that I haven't had to get up to speed on what we do overseas. After working overseas, I came into our headquarters and I was in charge of our overseas operations. And then even during Carolyn Wu's time period, I was our chief operating officer, so keenly involved in all those operations. Probably the newest thing is getting out to the domestic audience a little bit more, because I spent a lot of my time interacting with our local partners, bishops' conferences overseas and things like that. And so it's bringing that word to the U.S.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about a couple of initiatives too, and I know Pope Francis has come up with the Share the Journey campaign too, and I wanted to talk to you about that and the role that CRS is playing in that.
Sure. You know, it's a really exciting campaign. As many people know, the refugee crisis has been, you know, a key issue around the world, and we see it not only on our southern border, you know, with the Latin American population that comes this way, but also overseas when we have people migrating from Africa to Europe, and then, of course, with the violence that we see in the Middle East, Iraq and Syria. So the Holy Father on September 22nd launched a campaign. Catholic Relief Services is part of Caritas International, and so it's an international campaign that really touches all the social service organizations of the Church and the bishops' conferences. So Catholic Relief Services combined with Catholic Charities USA and MRS, the Migration and Refugee Service of the bishops, to promote this effort that the Pope has launched.
And talk about that, the relational aspect of Share the Journey, and how, you know, and I'm sure you've met migrants in your work too, and being able to sort of relate to them by facing them one-on-one and talking to them. Yeah.
You know, it's incredible. you know, been with CRS about 30 years. My thesis for my master's degree was illegal migration from Mexico and Central America to the United States. So this isn't a new issue. This is going on many, many years, and it's been one of those issues where, as a church, the Catholic Church covers it from one end to the other. So Catholic Relief Services, we work in the local communities, try to assist people, and actually try to assist them to not to have to migrate. So the idea there is most of these people don't want to leave their homes, don't want to leave their communities, don't want to leave their countries, and we try to provide them with that assistance, either a secure environment, access to food and a livelihood, or healthcare, education, so that they aren't forced to move because of violence or economics or something like that. If they do choose to move, then the Church's role is to assist them in that role, and we have done a lot of assistance throughout Europe. We were going to taper down our operations in Europe, but when the migration crisis hit again these past 2 years, we actually upgraded our activities in Europe. And then we pass it over to MRS and Catholic Charities when people are going to be resettled in the United States. So we handle the overseas side in trying to assist people so they don't have to migrate, and then when they do, that they're safe during that migration. But in the United States, it would be MRS and Catholic Charities that would resettle you.
Okay. And Catholic Relief Services relies on donations as well, and I know one of the things that people are probably familiar with during the course of Lent is Operation Rice Bowl, and maybe you could talk about that. You know, I remember when I was a kid too, and how successful this has been, and it's sort of unites people with the idea of Catholic Relief Services just through the rice bowls.
It really does, and that's how I actually first heard of CRS as well, was through the CRS Rice Bowl. Now this coming year it will be focused on migration a little bit more specifically, given the crisis that's ongoing. But it really is an opportunity to engage a lot of youth and their families, and so religious education communities. I have a 12-year-old son, and so they all collect their rice bowls and start, getting it out. And it's a campaign that occurs during Lent, so it's a time for us to reflect on what we have and what we can give back. So the Holy Father, he kicked it off in Rome, but really he kicked off this campaign when he went to Lampedusa and adopted 3 families. And so he then challenged the rest of us, what can we do to make others feel comfortable? And being a land of migrants, as the United States is, and knowing my own roots coming over from Ireland at one time, we weren't that well received at that time. And so what can we do to make other people's journey that much better, and how can we reach out? And so that's what we're trying to do. Our Rice Bowl will combine with the efforts of this Share the Journey campaign. And so hopefully we'll provide some materials for young people to learn a little bit more about it and engage their families as well.
So as we mentioned at the beginning of the interview, you're coming up on a year. Talk about what your hopes are for the future for CRS and your role, leading that.
Well, CRS is actually coming up on its 75th anniversary. So this coming year will be the 75th anniversary of the agency. And so kind of my 1-year anniversary seems a little bit small, or my 30-year anniversary with the agency. But what we're really looking at is, how do we make greater connections of the Catholic community? Can we energize and start a movement here in the United States which is linking a lot of the Catholic causes together to assist our brothers and sisters in the United States, but also around the world? And so that's what we're looking at. We've got wonderful programs overseas, and we're continuing to support them. But we're also trying to reach out and raise awareness in the United States so we can move that forward. I recently was at a meeting of the African bishops, 89 African bishops in Dakar, Senegal, and we talked about how we all need to join together. And those bishops were talking about, if there's violence in one country, we shouldn't consider that a problem of that country. And if there's a problem of malaria or Ebola, as many of us were worried about in another country, that's all of our problem. If we can unite that Catholic effort and bring all of the groups together, the Bishops' Conference, the social organizations, the Justice and Peace, the religious communities and congregations, what a tremendous effect we can have as a church. We're all doing great things, but if we can bring that together. So one of the things I'd like to do is see how we can better utilize that Catholic network, bring it together to have greater impact.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Sean, for talking with us. CRS.org is where you want to go to find out more information and to get the Operation Rice Bowl and all the information on that as well. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.